present have low vision or have another print disability which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Corrine, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the February 23rd, 2026 issue of the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. As always, thank you for joining us today. The highlights under business and finance are NVIDIA chips for laptop computers are set to hit the market this year in products from Dell, Lenovo, and others. A return to the consumer PC market for the leader in artificial intelligence chips. Investor Ed Garden has built a stake in building product supplier Fortune Brands, the maker of Moen faucets and Master Lock padlocks, and is seeking to replace the incoming chief executive along with other changes. U.S. investors are flocking to the so-called halo trade, buying shares of companies that appear to have strong odds of surviving the artificial intelligence revolution. Trump demanded that Netflix drop former National Security Advisor Susan Rice from its board, adding another political headache to the company's pursuit of Warner Brothers Discovery's key entertainment assets. Streaming appears to have thrown a lifeline to cable television, as cable providers make streaming apps part of their subscription packages as an inducement to consumers to stay. Latham and Watkins poached two partners to join its practice from Wachtell Lipton, the elite law firm in Manhattan, in the latest talent maneuvering in the M&A legal industry. Boutique investment bank Centerview Partners agreed to settle a lawsuit with a former analyst shortly before trial, resolving a case that was set to examine the responsibilities of one of the most grueling jobs in finance. Now for the key articles under the worldwide section. Trump said he would increase to 15% a global tariff that will replace many of the duties ruled illegal by the Supreme Court on Friday. Mexico's military killed the country's most powerful drug kingpin, Nemesio Mencho Oseguera, escalating the government's war against cartels. A man who police said was armed with a shotgun and in possession of a gasoline canister was shot and killed after breaching the secure perimeter at Trump's Mar-a-Lago home. Students at universities across Tehran clashed with pro-Iranian regime demonstrators as anger over a brutal government crackdown spilled onto campuses for a second straight day. A South Carolina judge denied a claim of self-defense for one of two men who had avoided arrest by saying they feared for their lives when they fatally shot a third man during a road rage encounter. Two federal agencies contradicted each other about whether the TSA pre-check program for airport travelers would remain open during the DHS shutdown. Trump said he plans to send a hospital ship to Greenland as part of his continuing effort to exercise control of the island in the Arctic. GOP Representative Maria Elvira Salazar warned Trump that his administration's hardline deportation policies are putting the Republican Party's House majority at risk in the midterm elections. The picture on today's front page shows a jubilant photo of the U.S. hockey team winning gold. The caption, "They're number one." Jack Hughes, one of the men's hockey squad, gave his all, including 2 teeth, as his goal beat Canada 2-1. The win on the last day of the Milan Cortina Winter Games delivered the U.S. its first Olympic championship since 1980. And the headline, "Overtime Goal Lifts U.S. to Olympic Hockey Gold." The article, "U.S. Wins Thriller for Hockey Gold," by Jared Diamond and Lane Higgins. The last time the Americans won a gold medal in men's ice hockey on the sport's grandest stage, they needed a miracle. This time they had Jack Hughes. Less than 2 minutes into sudden death overtime, in the most anticipated U.S. hockey game in a generation, Hughes delivered Team USA's most dramatic goal in nearly half a century. His heroics sent the Americans to a thrilling 2-1 victory over Canada. 46 years to the day since a ragtag bunch of amateurs upset the Soviet Union in the Miracle on Ice. And as the team celebrated its Olympic championship with American flags draped around their shoulders, one thing was clear. The U.S. was the best team in the world. No divine intervention needed. 1980 was a pretty long time ago, said Mike Eruzian, the captain of the squad in Lake Placid, and these guys are so much better than we were. The Americans delivered. Goaltender Connor Hellebuyck, the reigning NHL MVP, was spectacular, saving 41 of the 42 shots he faced. At one point in the second period, he helped the U.S. kill a 5-on-3 power play. Then, as the Americans desperately searched for a breakthrough in overtime, Hughes blasted a wrist shot into the back of the net and made history. Other articles from the front page follow. How the Epstein Files release frustrated Trump, White House. Reams of new data came to light, forcing DOJ to scramble to complete redactions, by Josh Dawsey and Sadie Gurman. When the Justice Department released its last trove of millions of files about Jeffrey Epstein, President Trump found himself in the same place he had spent a year trying to avoid, dealing with the fallout again. The files showed his own Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, had visited with Epstein long after Lutnick said they had cut ties. Lutnick had to publicly explain his past statements, provoking a direct conversation with Trump, administration officials familiar with the matter said. Trump questioned why he previously denied connections to Epstein when he knew he had visited Epstein's island, the official said. Since last February, the administration has tried to move on from questions about an issue that has animated Trump supporters like few others, even as it has continued to metastasize. Trump officials initially opposed the release of the files from the investigation into the convicted sex offender, and then fumbled the response, telling allies there was little new information to glean from the documents. The disclosures from the latest release, ordered by Congress, have instead forced prominent lawyers and business leaders to step aside and prompted new criminal inquiries in 3 other countries. Former President Bill Clinton and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton are testifying before Congress this week, after the release files included photos of Bill Clinton visiting with Epstein, too. The latest episode started during a conference call just before Christmas, when aides broke the news to Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche that another 1,000,000 documents attorneys believed were likely duplicates, in fact, weren't. Blanche sighed in exasperation, eventually alerting senior White House aides who shared his anger and received updates for days, administration officials said. In the ensuing weeks, the agency ordered hundreds of additional prosecutors to review the files, working through weekends to redact sensitive information, and at times plying them with pizza to keep going at night. No one is suggesting this is how we wanted to start the year in terms of our focus, but this is the task at hand, wrote Tyson Duva, head of the Justice Department's Criminal Division, in a January 9th email, telling lawyers to review 1,000 pages of Epstein files a day. The sooner we do, the sooner this is over, he wrote. Attorney General Pam Bondi had been on thin ice with Trump, in part over her handling of the Epstein review. Some Republicans complained about her performance, but the president was pleased, officials familiar with the matter said. Trump had told aides that more Democrats are being dinged than Republicans, and has publicly said he was exonerated. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said Trump has confidence in Bondi and Ludnick. Trump boosts global tariff to 15%. The rate is up from 10% level, President announced after High Court setback, by Gavin Bade and Natalie Andrews, Washington. President Trump said he would increase to 15% a global tariff that will replace many of the duties ruled illegal by the Supreme Court. In a social media post on Saturday, the president said the new level, up from 10%, would take effect immediately. He said his decision to increase the tariff rate was the result of a thorough, detailed, and complete review of the ridiculous, poorly written, and extraordinarily anti-American Supreme Court ruling. On Friday, the Supreme Court overturned most of Trump's second-term tariffs, rejecting the administration's argument that a 1977 law, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or EPA, implicitly authorized the tariffs. Later that day, Trump denounced the ruling and immediately reinstated a 10% global tariff under a different authority, Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974. Section 122 allows for tariffs of up to 15% for 150 days. After that period, Trump has said those levies will be replaced with a longer-lasting tariff authority, Section 301 of the Trade Act. That provision would allow for more permanent levies, but requires months-long investigations before tariffs can be imposed, which Trump hinted at in his Saturday Post. During the next short number of months, the Trump administration will determine and issue the new and legally permissible tariffs, which will continue our extraordinary, successful process of making America great again, Trump posted. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Russia, China offer ally Iran little help, by David S. Cloud. Iran has sought for years to build closer military ties with China and Russia, but its powerful friends are proving reluctant to step forward as the regime faces the most acute U.S. threat to its survival in decades. Russia and Iran conducted small-scale joint naval training in the Gulf of Oman this past week, a show of force dwarfed by the U.S. firepower assembled in the region at sea and on land. An exercise involving ships from China, as well as Russia and Iran, is planned to take place soon in the Strait of Hormuz, Iranian state media reported. Iran has also sought to rebuild its missile stockpile, air defenses, and other capabilities with help from China and Russia, some analysts said, after those elements of its military power were battered in a 12-day war against Israel and the U.S. in June. But Beijing and Moscow have shown little willingness to provide direct military assistance if President Trump does order an attack on Iran, some analysts said. They're not going to sacrifice their own interest for the Iranian regime, said Danny Citrinovich, a former Israeli military intelligence official and now a senior researcher at the Tel Aviv-based Institute for National Security Studies. They are hoping the regime will not be toppled, but they are definitely not going to counter the U.S. militarily. Smaller businesses are giving bigger nod to 401ks, by Ann Tergeson. Small businesses, from farms to sport clubs, are now offering 401ks to their employees, filling what has long been a hole in the U.S. retirement savings system. The number of workers at small businesses with access to 401k-style plans has grown by nearly 6 million since 2019, according to a report published on Saturday by Gusto, a payroll and benefits provider. Among them is Cheryl Martin, CEO of Nitron Financial Solutions, who started a 401k plan a few years ago for her then 6-person firm, which handles accounting and bookkeeping services for professional service companies and faith-based schools. Martin said she added the 401k to help her National Harbor, Maryland company attract and retain workers. She also wanted to save for her own retirement, something she had put on hold after launching the firm in 2012. Small businesses have lagged behind larger ones in offering 401ks, in part because of the cost of setting them up and the time involved. But in recent years, 401k adoption has picked up among smaller employers in response to a competitive job market, relatively new tax credits, and laws in several states that require many employers to give workers a way to save. In race for deals, boys repeat a grade. More redo 8th grade in bid to juice their college sports earning potential. By Harriet Ryan. Michael Cancelleri, an entrepreneur in San Clemente, California, has poured tens of thousands of dollars into his son's baseball career. Club team fees, tournament travel, and top-of-the-line equipment. As high school approached, Cancelleri decided that wasn't enough. He paid about $20,000 for his son, a straight A student, to repeat a grade at a private middle school sports academy. The draw to do it was just giving him a little bit of extra time to develop and mature, said Cancelleri, whose 15-year-old son Carter has grown about 3 inches since August and hopes to be a strong competitor next year as a high school freshman. 60 other boys are repeating a grade at the same academy, the Togethership, where coursework includes throwing mechanics, game film review, and nutrition, along with traditional subjects such as algebra and English. Holding kids back in school for an athletic edge has existed for decades on the elite fringe of prep sports. In recent years, it has exploded in popularity for middle school boys. Grounded. A ground crew de-iced a plane at LaGuardia Airport in New York on Saturday as a fast-developing storm threatened to pummel the East Coast with a blizzard. Now for other articles within the paper. Students battle loyalists in Iran. For a second straight day, anger over brutal crackdown spills onto campuses. By Benoit Falcon. Students at universities across Tehran clashed with pro-regime demonstrators on Sunday as anger over a brutal government crackdown spilled onto university campuses for a second straight day in a sign of rising unrest. Verified footage showed students chanting slogans on Sunday, commemorating those killed and calling for the fall of the regime were met by opposing demonstrations. The pro-regime Fars and Mer news agencies reported, with the two sides scuffling at some locations. Trump cites hospital ship for Greenland by Natalie Andrews. President Trump said he plans to send a hospital ship to Greenland as part of his continuing effort to exercise control of the island in the Arctic, which he has said is vital for national security and contains mineral riches. Late Saturday, Trump posted on social media that he is sending the ship to take care of the many people who are sick and not being taken care of there. It's on the way. Trump posted the missive after a meeting with Louisiana Governor Jeff Landry, whom he named as envoy to Greenland last year. The White House didn't respond to questions about what specifically prompted the ship's deployment. Greenland's government provides free health care to the population. The Navy has 2 hospital ships, the East Coast-based USNS Comfort and the West Coast-based USNS Mercy. It couldn't be determined which ship Trump would send or when it would arrive, Both vessels are in a shipyard in Mobile, Alabama, and not at their home ports, according to the ship tracking website Marine Traffic. It's going to be a no thank you from here, said Greenlandic Prime Minister Jens Frederik Nielsen. We have a public health system where treatment is free for citizens. It's a deliberate choice and a basic part of our society. It's not like that in the United States where it costs money to go to the doctor, he said. NVIDIA bids to be the brain of consumer PCs again, by Yang Yi. NVIDIA chips for laptop computers are set to hit the market this year in products from Dell, Lenovo, and others, a return to the consumer PC market for the leader in artificial intelligence chips. The world's most valuable company by market capitalization, NVIDIA isn't expecting big profits soon from getting its chips into everyday PCs, but analysts said it wanted to keep a connection with consumers in an era when every device will be AI enabled. This isn't just about supplying certain chips or making better parts. Instead, this is about NVIDIA becoming more integrated into the next generation PC ecosystem, said Jason Tai, Deputy Director of Taiwan-based research firm Digitimes. NVIDIA and its partners hope to make PCs lighter and thinner while keeping long battery life. Analysts said that would allow hardware running Microsoft's Windows operating system to compete more directly with the latest MacBook models from Apple. Investors go heavy on AI immune assets, by Hannah Aaron Lang. After a 3-year love affair with anything related to artificial intelligence, U.S. investors are flocking to the factory owners, fast food restaurants, and commodity companies that have seemingly strong odds of surviving the technological revolution intact. Call it the AI immunity trade, HALO, for heavy assets, low obsolescence, or just another iteration of the jitters that have periodically rippled through markets since the AI investing boom began. The winners include McDonald's, ExxonMobil, and tractor maker Deere. Left behind are the perceived potential victims of the AI revolution, a list that has ranged from wealth managers to software firms. In the past month, the S&P 500 sectors for industrials, materials, utilities, and consumer staples have surged ahead of the overall index, while information technology has slid and the Magnificent Seven tech giants, Alphabet, Amazon, Apple, Meta, Microsoft, NVIDIA, and Tesla have languished. Through February 20th, the index's consumer staples sector has notched its best year-to-date performance on record. These are the companies that you cannot type something in a prompt and disrupt, said Josh Brown, Chief Executive at Ritholtz Wealth Management, who coined the term HALO earlier this month. Whenever there's a wave of uncertainty, all of the things that people were confident about require a repricing. Though the S&P 500 has eked out a positive return for 2026 so far, moves in the benchmark have masked sometimes violent shifts beneath the surface, with traders fleeing the industries they suspect are under threat of major disruption. One example took place in early February after AI startup Anthropic announced tools to help automate legal and research tasks that erased some $300 billion in value from software, financial data, and exchange stocks. The next week, similar fears dragged down the shares of wealth managers, insurance brokers, and commercial real estate companies. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. From the editorial page, Neil Gorsuch tries to revive Congress. The justice explains why the legislative process is the bulwark of liberty. As they wait out the latest winter storm, members of Congress ought to spend time reading Justice Neil Gorsuch's concurring opinion in the Supreme Court's rejection of President Trump's claim of emergency power to impose tariffs. Learning resources versus Trump. The justice has more confidence in Congress than the members themselves do these days. Justice Gorsuch rides shotgun to Chief Justice John Roberts' excellent majority opinion, and he mows down both the dissents and the concurring opinion by liberal Justice Elena Kagan. It's an intellectual tour de force, but his main theme isn't an assertion of judicial power. It's an effort to encourage Congress to reclaim its proper authority under the Constitution's separation of powers. The justice spends 46 pages explaining and defending the court's major questions doctrine, which says the executive must point to clear congressional language to justify a regulation with significant consequences. The liberal justices tried to duck the doctrine while joining the majority opinion, while the three dissenting conservatives tried to carve out exceptions on foreign policy and tariffs. Justice Gorsuch thoroughly rebuffs both, but his larger effort is to explain that major question standard is meant to protect legislative authority. The major questions doctrine is not an anti-administrative state, as Justice Kagan has asserted, Judge Gorsuch writes. It is pro-Congress by holding agencies to a clear statement standard from Congress. The judiciary protects against the usurpation of legislative power by presidents. Our founders understood that men are not angels, and we disregard that insight at our peril when we allow the few, or the one, to aggrandize their power based on loose or uncertain authority, he writes. We delude ourselves too if we think that power will accumulate safely and only in the hands of dispassionate people found in agencies. As the court has ruled, this applies when liberal presidents impose vaccine or energy mandates, or when a Republican president claims tariff power based on no clear law. This protects against one-man or unaccountable bureaucratic rule, which is increasingly how the U.S. has been governed under presidents of both political parties, as they seek to avoid the hard work of getting something passed in Congress. In our view, the recent weakness of Congress vis-a-vis the president has many causes. Political Polarization and narrow majorities make it harder for bipartisan coalitions to form. Media focus on the presidency draws more readers than do stories on legislative process. The failure of civic education about the American system produces a public that is more susceptible to demagoguery and political idolatry. But as Justice Gorsuch makes clear, the difficulty of passing legislation is a constitutional feature, not a fault. Deliberation tempers impulse, and compromise hammers disagreements into workable solutions, he writes. And because laws must earn such broad support to survive the legislative process, they tend to endure. He rightly calls the legislative process the bulwark of liberty. This ought to be a stirring message, especially to those in Congress and the press who fret about the end of democracy. The left, in particular, likes to write vague laws that hand power to bureaucratic experts who can dictate how Americans should live. Justice Kagan says forthrightly that this is a virtue. No political system is perfect, and Congress can run off the rails. The Smoot-Hawley tariff of 1930 showed how legislative log rolling can end in disaster when a President Hoover lacks the courage to veto. But Congress has since ceded too much tariff power to a president who refuses to use it with restraint. Putting limits on discretionary tariff authority would be a good start on reviving the proper role of Congress. From the opinion pages, Immigration Law, Lives, and Labor. How should immigration policy change to balance better the need to enforce the law with humanitarian and economic concerns? There are many journal contributors who give their opinions. However, I am only going to read Tunku Veradarajan's comments. There were some 14 million undocumented aliens in the U.S. as of 2023. That's more than the entire population of any single American state other than California, Texas, Florida, and New York. It isn't the sort of number of people you can just decide to sling out saying, "Be gone." Even if the White House could dispatch enough immigration agents, it would look like a domestic army fighting on American soil. In other words, distressing. The president would be waging war against undocumented millions, and as the recent ugly incidents involving ICE have shown, against their humane American well-wishers, as well as hard left agitators. What to do? In broad terms, the following. Number 1, target, detain, and deport the undesirable elements defined primarily by criminal status. No mercy. They're out. Number 2, accept all the undocumented young, up to college age, who are here and know no other home, along with their parents. It's the civilized thing to do, and the U.S. is a civilized nation. Number 3, evaluate other undocumented people residing in the U.S. on a discretionary basis, with a presumption in favor of residency rights if they're employed, have paid taxes, and haven't abused the welfare system. If you check all 3 boxes, you likely stay. But tack on an additional requirement that you must learn English. Number 4, enforce border controls to the fullest, most exacting extent. With those 4 guiding principles, it's over to our lawmakers to hammer out the implementation. Ignore the AI hysteria. We won't see a utopia or a dystopia. We'll see faster growth and more productivity. By Andy Kessler. Scaremongering that artificial intelligence will kill mankind has died down. Phew. But both AI boosterism and backlash about AI killing jobs are whipping up public hysteria. In 1812, Luddites took hammers to knitting machines for fear of jobs. Substack and podcast, equally misinformed, are the new word hammers. The first hysterical scenario is utopia. Anthropic's Dario Amodei suggests that we are near the end of the exponential. Soon we'll have a country of geniuses in a data center. Mass unemployment is coming, but don't worry, there's no need to work. Sit at home and play Assassin's Creed on your Xbox, stream Bridgerton Season 12, and chow down on 3D printed Beyond Meatloaf delivered by Rosie the Robot from your Food Araka Cycle, George Jetson's serving machine. Like Burning Man, life is one big party with infinite resources and no politics. Bernie Sanders' photos are everywhere. Peace and love. The second scenario is dystopia. Surely you've heard that Musk-like techno-fascist oligarchs, quite the mouthful, will run everything. One commentator thinks we will be well cared for pets. The New World Order is fully automated neo-feudalism, and you're the serf. We'll have robot cars, robot cops, Terminators, and a fully functioning Skynet that grades social status from Instagram likes, and unless we're all entombed Matrix-like in pods wearing narrow links to capture our psychic energy. The promise of utopia always leads to dystopia. See the Soviet Union, Cuba, and California, because self-selecting elites tax the living daylights out of every productive endeavor. And mythical job losses are always used as excuse to implement universal basic income, serf subsidies. Don't fall for it. Mustafa Suleyman, CEO of Microsoft AI, speeds things up. White-collar work, where you're sitting down at a computer, either being a lawyer or an accountant or a project manager or a marketing person, most of those tasks will be fully automated by an AI within the next 12 to 18 months. Note, he says tasks, not jobs. All boosters believe AI will usher in a new era of productivity. I agree. So according to Mr. Amodei, half of all entry-level jobs could be toast and unemployment could spike up to 20%. I adamantly disagree. Neither scenario will happen, not in this century anyway. There is too much left to do. Reality will be a third scenario: paced obsolescence and growth. Productivity is always positive for society, but it doesn't change things overnight. Like the concept of creative destruction introduced by Joseph Schumpeter, new technology starts at the high end, where it is economically feasible. AI for coding and customer service today, and then works its way down over decades, seeping into the economy sector by sector. But this time it's different, we hear. Yeah, right. Corporations use technology to automate processes and profit. No hissing. That profit funds employees to solve bigger problems for customers. Higher productivity kills jobs only if you take a snapshot and ignore the dynamics of changing job activity. Farmers, buggy whip manufacturers, customer service operators become CRISPR gene slicers. AI engine optimizers, legal arbitrageurs using prediction markets and other jobs mostly unimaginable. Yet, utopian living, George Jetson worked at Spacely Space Sprockets. Can we have 20% unemployment and a growing economy? Not for long. We sometimes get a jobless recovery coming out of recessions, as we did following the financial crisis or COVID. But jobs are soon created as productivity supplies excess capital to invest in new and more complex problems. And we never run out of problems. Stop taking snapshots. Riddle me this: with high unemployment, who's going to buy all the stuff AI's enhanced productivity promises for the economy? Growth won't happen. Who are they going to sell to? Influencers? It's self-defeating. Productivity is a job creator, not destroyer. Desktop publishing meant everyone could create magazines. Spreadsheets meant everyone could be an analyst. Anthropic's Claude now allows everyone to create code. Technology may kill old jobs, but then voila, it creates millions of new ones. Sure, generative AI will fundamentally change how businesses operate. So what? We need to embrace AI in education rather than ban it. So many problems not yet solved will match with tons of untapped human potential just begging to be unleashed, creating things not yet thought of. Like what? Most guess cancer treatments, longevity discoveries, and inhabiting Mars. But no one really knows. Then again, go back and try to explain to your 2010 self that a click of a button would magically bring a car, with or without a driver, to you within 5 minutes. Or that you could stream 4K TV shows over Wi-Fi on your phone or a 98-inch set. Or that Generation Z gets its news from TikTok. Imagine how incredulous and cynical you'd be. New stuff is unimaginable, except by its risk-taking creators. So ignore the AI hysterics and mass unemployment claims. They're ignorant, nearsighted snapshots. The world is much more dynamic. I promise you won't be anyone's pet. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The Cuban regime's slow collapse. Will Trump seize the opportunity to free the island or be tempted into a deal? By Mary Anastasia O'Grady. President Trump caused an international uproar when he declared that the U.S. intends to take ownership of Greenland, one way or another. With an Arctic thaw making the large island in the northern western hemisphere ever more strategically important, Mr. Trump justified the use of force, if necessary, on national security grounds. Another island closer to home poses a more immediate risk than Greenland, owned by U.S. ally Denmark. Cuba, by all indications, is being used for intelligence gathering by China, presenting a clear and present danger. A 2024 paper by scholars at the Center for Strategic and International Studies listed 4 sites within Cuba that are most likely to be supporting China's efforts to collect intelligence on the United States and its neighbors. The authors note, quote, "These sites have undergone observable upgrades in recent years, even as Cuba has faced increasingly dire economic prospects that have drawn it closer to China. It would be strange if the Trump administration didn't recognize the current collapse of the Cuban economy as a unique opportunity to shore up national security by restoring democracy on the island. Yet Mr. Trump doesn't appear to have a plan to support such a transition." He said the capture of Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro on January 3rd leaves Cuba ready to fall. But he also said a U.S. action similar to what occurred in Caracas is probably unnecessary and that Cuba should make a deal with Washington. Coming from a real estate magnate known for his transactional approach to governance, this disturbs no small number of freedom-loving Cubans on the island and in exile. A free Cuba calls for an unconditional surrender by the ruling clique in Havana. Anything less plays into the hands of the next generation of regime thugs who are looking to buy time. The regime is running low on everything it needs to operate its system of repression. Acute shortages of electricity and gasoline have been exacerbated by the U.S. blockade of oil shipments. But the humanitarian crisis was well underway before the U.S. oil quarantine. Cuban privation is the product of years of Havanese greed and corruption. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has called regime leadership incompetent. That's wrong. It's quite good at what it does, working to accumulate power and money. As I reported in this space in January 2025, a leak to the Miami Herald of internal government records showed that hundreds of millions of dollars earned by companies on the island that should go to public services end up in the accounts of GAESA, a state-owned conglomerate, or its subsidies. In 1959, Cubans gave up their freedom, some willingly, in exchange for promises that the state would provide for them. Now they have neither liberty nor bread. Society is ready to explode. Militarily, it would be easy for the U.S. to tip the regime over, but some 8.5 million people are suffering the breakdown of food distribution, widespread unemployment, the collapse of hospitals, the failure of public sanitation and portable water supplies, a housing deficit, and the epidemics of contagious diseases. Even if international aid could alleviate this suffering in the near term, the risks of de-Baathification, the collapse of public security with no replacement, as happened in Iraq, haunt the U.S. An orderly transition would require assistance from the rank and file. Mr. Trump's demurral at the use of U.S. force in Cuba hasn't helped, As usual, Cuba says it's ready to talk, and the words opening and reform float around. President Obama fell for that. No doubt those clinging to power like what they see in Venezuela, where the regime is still intact. The media says Mr. Rubio is engaging with the Castro family, but reporters rely on unnamed sources. First, the son of 94-year-old Raul Castro, Alejandro Castro Ispin, was rumored to be in Mexico talking to the Americans. When that appeared to be untrue, the storyline shifted. The new Havana counterpart, now whispered to be doing the talking for Cuba, is Raul Rodriguez Castro, grandson of the old man. Mr. Rodriguez Castro, known as El Cangrejo, the crab, because of a birth defect, never finished school, but he is said to be much loved by his ruthless grandfather and his buddies with the crooks running GAESA. He could be acting as a go-between. Cuba denied this on Friday, calling it speculation. It's possible that unnamed Trump officials, by advancing the story, are trying to sow division inside the Cuban government and give head of state Miguel Diaz-Canel reason to worry he is being sidelined. The regime has been cutting deals with Washington on and off for nearly 7 decades. Now is the time for all of them to leave. Letters to the editor. The Obama and Biden years made allies distrust the U.S. Ron Emanuel, in the Don Roe Doctrine's Year of Failure, seems to have forgotten the role that Barack Obama and Joe Biden played in making our allies around the world uneasy about our commitment to them. When a politician like Mr. Emanuel ignores the failures of people in his own party and doesn't acknowledge their effect on international relations, he will be destined to repeat their mistakes if he becomes Commander-in-Chief. From Ken Dropek, Houston. The Pepper and Salt cartoon shows a woman sitting in a chair looking at her child's report card as he says, "Well, actually, it was ChatGPT that got the D's." You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the February 23rd, 2026 issue of the Wall Street Journal. We read from the Wall Street Journal every Monday through Thursday at 11 p.m. Your reader has been Corrine. Thank you for listening.